It was 2:13 a.m. when the hum of my old desktop filled the tiny Seattle apartment I'd turned into my last battlefield. The screen's blue light flickered against the half-empty coffee mug, a pile of overdue bills, and a woman who refused to give up. I had one goal left tonight: get my prototype, the EchoMind engine, to run without crashing. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat, daring me to keep going. The city outside was asleep, but my mind was screaming with noise lines of code self-doubt and the echoes of my brother's voice from dinner last week. "Still chasing your little video games, Liv. Mom says you're wasting your life." I'd laughed it off then, pretending his words didn't pierce as deep as they did, but tonight they were louder than the rain tapping my window. Connor was always the successful one, the attorney in the tailored suits, the man who bragged about winning Thanksgiving debates. I was the dropout who turned down a six-figure job to build something no one believed in. My mother called it a phase. My younger sister called it a mistake. I called it survival. The laptop whirred louder, the progress bar creeping toward completion. My eyes burned from the glow, my fingers trembling from caffeine and fear. The game's code wasn't just programming, it was years of failure compressed into logic and hope. My savings were gone, my rent was late again, and the world had made it clear that women in their 30s didn't get to start over. A vibration broke my focus. My phone lit up a new message from Connor. "Still awake. Go to bed. You're not 20 anymore." I stared at it for a long second. Then, as if the universe was staging its cruel comedy, another message followed. "You should have stayed at Neural Path. They're hiring again." My stomach twisted. That job had fired me after I'd exposed their unethical data project. They'd offered me hush money to disappear quietly. I hadn't. Instead, I disappeared loudly to myself. I turned back to the screen. The final line of code blinked, waiting. My breath caught as I hit run. The console filled with scrolling text, each success message a small rebellion. For 10 long seconds, I watched it process, and then it happened. The simulation didn't crash. The data fed back perfectly. The AI responded in real time, adjusting difficulty pacing, even color tones, based on micro-reactions from my test script. It worked. After months of sleepless nights, it actually worked. I exhaled shakily, leaning back in my chair, the ache in my neck replaced by a wave of disbelief. I thought of every snide comment, every dinner table smirk. "You'll be broke by Christmas. You're too old for dreams. Games are for kids, Olivia." The phrases replayed like static, but this time I felt something new, calm defiance. The hum of the machine sounded like applause. I laughed, the sound breaking into the silence. But it wasn't joy yet. It was something sharper, raw, a mix of exhaustion and quiet rage. Because even as victory glowed on my monitor, I knew what waited outside this room. A family that didn't believe in me. A brother who'd remind me that logic wins over imagination. A world ready to dismiss another woman building something alone. Still in that moment, I whispered to the screen. They don't have to believe. Not yet. The rain outside thickened into a storm, thunder rolling low across the city. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Inside my four walls, the only sound that mattered was the soft chime of success. The line of text appeared, "Process complete." My reflection on the glass looked like someone else tired, yes, but lit from within by something dangerously close to hope. I didn't know it then, but that faint, trembling spark would soon set everything on fire. Sunday dinners at my mother's house had always felt like court hearings, and tonight I was the defendant. The smell of roasted lamb filled the air, masking the tension that always sat heavy between the walls of Marilyn Reyes's pristine kitchen. My mother believed that family dinners kept us grounded. What she meant was control. She liked seeing us all seated beneath her chandelier, the three perfect children who were anything but. Connor, 41. The golden sun leaned back at the head of the table like he owned the house. His cufflinks glinted under the light as he swirled his wine. Across from him sat Tessa, 30, endlessly scrolling through her phone, living off our mother's approval and money. And then there was me, the misfit, at 36, the daughter who traded a stable career for silly computer games. Mom smiled, that tight kind of smile that never reached her eyes. So, Olivia, how's your project going? Her voice landed softly, but the silence that followed was sharp. I cut a piece of lamb, pretending the question didn't sting. It's going well. I actually made some big progress this week. Connor chuckled. Progress? You mean more pixels? Laughter echoed around the table, polite but poisonous. I forced a smile. It's not just pixels. I've been working on adaptive AI systems that can. Liv Mom interrupted, waving her fork like she was swatting away a fly. Sweetheart, I know you love your hobbies, but you're 36. Don't you think it's time to get serious again? Neural Path is hiring, and your brother could make a few calls. I'm serious about this, I said quietly. This isn't just a game. Connor leaned forward, smirking. You said that 3 years ago. You burned through your savings, didn't you, Connor? I warned, but he kept going. I mean, come on, Liv. You had a solid engineering career. Now you're playing indie developer in a basement. How long before reality hits? The words hit harder than I wanted to admit. I tried to steady my breathing, but the air felt thick like it didn't want me there. Tessa looked up from her phone just long enough to chime in. Maybe she just likes attention. You know all those follow your dream stories on YouTube. I felt my pulse in my throat. It's not about attention. It's about creating something that matters. Mom sighed. Olivia, I know you think you're special, but everyone thinks their passion matters. You're not 20 anymore. It's time to be realistic. The silence that followed was suffocating. I looked at the three faces around the table, the lawyer, the leech, and the mother who measured love in achievements. I realized something then. They didn't just doubt me. They needed me to fail. My failure validated their safety, their choices, their normalcy. I set my fork down the sound sharper than I intended. You know I said my voice steady one day. You'll look back and realize what you dismissed tonight. Connor raised an eyebrow. Oh, what's that supposed to mean? It means you'll remember this conversation when you wish you'd listened. He laughed. I'll remember it when I pay your rent. The words sliced through the last bit of restraint I had. I stood napkin trembling in my hand. You don't have to believe in me, Connor. You just have to remember this moment. Mom's tone turned warning. Olivia, sit down. Don't make a scene. I smiled a calm, final smile. No scene. Just leaving early. I walked toward the door, my heels echoing against the hardwood, the house growing quieter with every step. At the doorway, I paused. Rain tapped the windows again, faint and rhythmic, like it was following me. I glanced back at them once more, three figures frozen in judgment, too proud to understand the weight of what they'd just done. You think this is failure? I said softly. But it's just the beginning. Then I stepped out into the night, the cold air hitting my face like freedom. Behind me, laughter resumed, a brittle kind that breaks easily. They didn't know it yet, but the woman they'd just dismissed was about to rewrite every rule they believed in. When I quit my job at Neural Path Robotics, people said I was crazy. Leaving a steady paycheck to build games out of a cramped apartment wasn't a decision most women my age made. But Neural Path had crossed a line using behavioral data from users to manipulate purchasing patterns. I had confronted my supervisor about it. He smiled and said, It's not manipulation, Olivia, it's innovation. I packed my things that same afternoon. The company offered a severance check to avoid bad press. I tore it in half. After that, every door I knocked on stayed shut. In Seattle's tech scene, burning bridges with a giant like Neural Path was career suicide. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd stumbled onto while working there, a framework that didn't just collect data but could learn how players felt. The idea haunted me like a half-finished melody. I called it Echo Engine, a system that could interpret hesitation, risk-taking joy, and frustration and reshape a game in real time to mirror the player's emotional state. I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't bear another round of laughter or doubt. By day, I taught coding to middle schoolers in a community center. By night, I coded until my eyes burned. The apartment became an ecosystem of energy drink cans, old monitors, and scribbled flowcharts taped to the wall. Sometimes I'd fall asleep on my keyboard and wake to find lines of random letters flooding my code. I'd laugh through the exhaustion. My friends had stopped calling months ago. Even my landlord began hinting at alternative arrangements when the rent fell behind. But then, one rainy evening, while I was debugging the reward algorithm, one of my students, a quiet 12-year-old named Ethan, came by to return a charger I'd lent him. He noticed the open laptop and asked shyly, "Miss Olivia, is that your game?" I nodded. "Kind of. It's still learning." He pressed a key, and a small animated character appeared on the screen, trapped in a maze. "Cool," he whispered, eyes wide. "It's like it knows where I'm gonna go next." I froze. He wasn't wrong. The AI had predicted his movement before he pressed the arrow key. "How does it do that?" he asked. I smiled. "It listens." He didn't understand what I meant, but when he left, his words lingered. "It knows me." That night, for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was coding in the dark. Maybe this wasn't just a game. Maybe it was a bridge between human instinct and digital empathy. I ran the prototype again, tweaking parameters, tracking micro-responses. The system responded fluid, alive. Each user input was reflected, learned from, and folded back into the experience. It wasn't just adapting, it was evolving. I looked at the word echo printed at the top of my code editor and whispered, "You might actually work." Outside, the wind howled through the alley, shaking the thin window glass. I didn't have investors, I didn't have a team. But I had this engine, this strange living thing that understood the people who played it better than they understood themselves. For the first time, I didn't crave validation. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was sacred. I was building something that could feel. I took a deep breath, saving the new build, the name flashing across my screen, EchoMind V1.0. The name felt right. It wasn't just about gaming. It was about reflection. Every emotion, every doubt, every late-night whisper of "you're wasting your life," all of it was now written in code. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, the hum of the machine steady and low. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something that might finally make all the noise worth it. When I released the first public demo of EchoMind, I expected nothing. I had no marketing budget, no fancy trailer, no influencer network. Just a 2-minute video posted on an indie developer forum with the caption, "A game that learns who you are." The first night, 10 downloads. The next day, 32. By the end of the week, almost 400. It was nothing by corporate standards, but to me, it felt like the world had finally cracked open. People were leaving comments that didn't sound like the usual indie game chatter. "This game gets me," one wrote. Another said, "I swear it's reading my mind. I've never felt this connected before." For the first time in years, I felt a pulse of validation, proof that I hadn't wasted all those lonely nights. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by sticky notes filled with player feedback, a mess of color-coded data that looked like hope in paper form. I decided to share it with my family. Maybe they'd finally see. I emailed them the link, attaching a short message. "Thought you might like to see what I've been working on." Then I waited. Hours turned into a day, then 2. No one responded. On the third night, I refreshed my inbox compulsively, as if I could will their names to appear. Finally, a message pinged from Connor. My heart leapt. The subject line read, "Cute." His message was one sentence: "I tried your game." It's cute. My daughter liked it for a few minutes. I stared at the screen, rereading the words until they blurred. Cute. Like a child's drawing hung on a fridge before being quietly replaced. My throat tightened. I wrote a reply, deleted. It wrote again, deleted again. Every version sounded either defensive or desperate. I finally closed the laptop. The light from the screen still glowed against my hands, pale and shaking. I thought maybe my mother would write, say something, anything. She didn't. The silence was worse than ridicule. It was proof that in their eyes I didn't matter. That night, I sat in the dark for hours, staring at the wall where I'd pinned up all my development sketches. For the first time, they didn't look like possibilities. They looked like evidence of obsession. The kind people whisper about at reunions. "She's still doing that computer thing. Poor thing." Around midnight, I stood and began taking the sketches down one by one. The room felt smaller with every pen I pulled out. When I reached the last sheet, the one that read, "EchoMind Games That Feel You Back," I stopped. My hand hovered. Then I took it down too. I stacked the papers neatly as if I were preparing them for burial and slid them into a drawer. I unplugged my computer, turned off the desk lamp, and stood in the silence that followed. It felt like defeat. But deep inside that hollow quiet, something else stirred, something cold, steady, and unshakable. I wasn't done. They thought their silence could stop me, but all it did was strip away the need to please them. When you have no one left to impress you, start creating for truth, not applause. I plugged the laptop back in, reopened the code, and stared at the blinking cursor. My reflection on the dark screen looked calm, detached, almost unfamiliar. All right, I whispered no more, waiting for approval. I renamed the project folder Echo Mind, V2 Alone Build. The name made me smile. It wasn't bitterness, it was clarity. The next morning, I took down the only framed photo on my desk, a family picture from 10 years ago. We were all smiling. It looked fake now. I placed it face down in the drawer with the sketches. For the first time, the desk felt like it belonged to me. I poured a cup of cold coffee, opened a fresh file, and began typing new code. My fingers moved with certainty I hadn't felt before. Outside, the rain hit the window harder, but I didn't notice. I'd lost their approval, yes. But in that loss, I'd found something better, my purpose sharpened into something unstoppable. 3 weeks later, it happened. Not because of marketing or luck, but because of a bored college student with a small gaming channel. His video popped up in my notifications one morning. This game reads my mind. I clicked out of curiosity, still half asleep. He was playing Echo Mind, narrating with disbelief as the game adjusted to his choices. "Guys, look at this," he said, laughter in his voice. "It's like the game knows when I'm lying. I swear it's tracking my hesitation." The comment section exploded. "This is insane. AI is getting too smart. Where can I play this?" Within 2 days, the video hit 100,000 views, then 300,000. I refreshed the analytics page for Echo Mind and almost dropped my coffee. Downloads had jumped from 400 to 25,000 overnight. Reddit threads started dissecting the game's mechanics. Some people loved it. Others were terrified. One comment stuck out. "This isn't just AI, it's empathy coded into software." I smiled at that because that was exactly what I had wanted it to be. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even celebrate. I just watched the numbers climb and tried to breathe. The next morning, gaming journalists were emailing me for interviews. Indie developers asked for collaborations. An executive from a startup offered me $50,000 to license the Echo engine. I didn't answer any of them. I wanted to understand the scale before opening that door. That evening, as I reviewed feedback logs, my phone buzzed with a notification from the family group chat. My mother had sent a photo, an old picture of me at age 12 holding my first coding trophy captioned, "Our little genius always loved her games." Beneath it, Connor replied with a single message. "Look, Liv's famous." Cute little fame. I stared at it for a long time. The words were the same tone as always, polished, dismissive, drenched in mockery. I didn't respond. Tessa added a laughing emoji. My mother reacted with a heart. The chat fell silent again. That was their pattern: ignore, mock, then claim. I closed my phone, set it face down, and leaned back in my chair. The sound of rain outside seemed softer tonight, like applause muffled by distance. I turned back to my screen and scrolled through a forum thread titled, "Why Does Echo Mind Feel So Human?" One user wrote, "It's not just playing against me. It's playing with me. It learns who I am." I read that line 3 times, feeling something tighten in my chest. They understood. Strangers from across the world saw what my own family never could. And in their curiosity, I found my validation. But validation wasn't enough anymore. I wanted to know just how far this could go. By the end of the week, downloads had crossed 100,000. Streamers were competing to break the AI, trying to predict its next move. No one could. A few tech reviewers speculated that a major studio must be backing the project secretly. No solo developer could achieve this, one wrote. I laughed quietly to myself. If only they knew it was one woman in a small apartment coding on a second-hand laptop surrounded by cold pizza boxes. That night, for the first time since I'd started, I didn't feel alone. Not because my family had come around, they hadn't, but because somewhere out there a million players were connecting to something I built with my bare hands. Still beneath the glow of success, a shadow lingered. I could almost hear Connor's voice in my head. "It's just a fad. You'll burn out." I smiled, typing new code into the console. "We'll see," I whispered to no one who burns first. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, hidden between junk mail and a power bill. Subject line partnership inquiry, Atlas Interactive. At first glance, I almost deleted it. Big studios didn't email nobodies, especially not women working alone from an apartment that smelled like coffee and determination. But something in me hesitated. I opened it. The message was short, professional, almost sterile. "We've reviewed Echo Mind and the underlying adaptive mechanics. We believe it represents a paradigm shift in interactive AI. We'd like to discuss potential collaboration." My heart hammered against my ribs. Atlas Interactive wasn't just any studio, it was the studio. The one behind half the best-selling games in the world. I reread the email 3 times, convinced it had to be a prank. I even checked the address. It was real. My hands shook as I typed a reply. "Thank you for reaching out. I'd love to discuss further." I hovered over the send button, doubting myself for one last second. Then I clicked. For an hour, I sat in silence, staring at the sent folder, half expecting the message to bounce back. When it didn't, I got up and started pacing. My mind raced with questions. How had they found me? Was this a trap I had worked so long in isolation that the idea of being seen felt dangerous? I opened my analytics dashboard. Downloads had passed 500,000. Reviews were glowing. The phrase "next evolution in gaming" appeared in more than one article. Still, I didn't tell anyone. Not my mother, not Connor, not even my friends from the coding group who'd stopped asking how I was months ago. I wasn't ready to share this, not after how easily hope had turned to humiliation before. The next day, another email arrived, this time from a senior developer at Atlas named Marcus Tanaka. He wanted to set up a video call. "Your work has potential beyond entertainment," he wrote. "We'd like to hear how you envision its future." Its future. The words felt heavy, almost sacred. I scheduled the call for Thursday. When the day came, I spent an hour rehearsing in front of my webcam, trying to sound confident without revealing how terrified I was. When the screen flickered on 5 faces appeared in the call window. Marcus smiled warmly. "Ms. Reyes, first, congratulations. Echo Mind is extraordinary." I exhaled, barely remembering to respond. "Thank you. It's been a long road." He nodded. "We can tell. We've never seen retention data like yours. It's not just gameplay, it's emotional architecture." I blinked, stunned that someone finally saw it. He continued, "We'd like to discuss acquisition options." My throat went dry. "Acquisition?" "Yes," he said simply. "Atlas is interested in purchasing the Echo engine and bringing you on board to develop next-gen adaptive systems." I managed a polite nod, even as my brain struggled to process the words. $200 million. That's what he said next. $200 million. The number echoed in my skull like a bell. I stayed calm on camera, pretending to be the composed professional I had always wanted to be. But inside, the girl who'd been mocked for cute little games was screaming. When the call ended, I sat there in silence. The hum of my laptop was the only sound in the room. Then, almost instinctively, I whispered to myself, "Don't say a word." Not yet. I didn't tell my family, not even when Atlas sent a follow-up to confirm the in-person meeting. This time I wanted the reveal on my own terms. I had been underestimated long enough. It was time they saw what silence could build. When Atlas proposed a formal presentation, I suggested a location that made Marcus raise an eyebrow: the Lexington Law Group boardroom in downtown Seattle. "Unusual choice," he said over the phone. "Any particular reason?" I smiled faintly. "My brother works there. He's always been curious about my progress." He chuckled, not catching the undertone. "If it's convenient for you, it's fine for us." Convenient wasn't the word. It was poetic. I'd spent years being laughed at in that family: Connor's law degree, Mom's social lunches, Tessa's passive cruelty. Every success of theirs had been weighed against my supposed failure. And now, the same space where Connor's ego ruled would become the theater of his undoing. The day of the presentation, I woke early. Seattle was bathed in soft gray light, the kind that made everything look cinematic and fateful. I tied my hair back, put on a charcoal gray suit, and stood in front of the mirror. My reflection looked calm, older somehow, not tired, but sharpened. I whispered, "They'll remember this day." At noon, I entered the Lexington building. The receptionist smiled politely, unaware of the storm brewing 3 floors up. When the elevator doors opened, the scent of polished wood and expensive coffee hit me. The boardroom was glass-walled, overlooking the skyline, a symbol of control and power. Connor was already there, leaning casually against the conference table, talking to 2 senior partners. When he saw me, his smirk appeared instantly. "Liv, I was just telling the guys you're pitching your mobile game today. Thought we'd host you somewhere more professional." The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was enough. I placed my laptop case on the table. "Appreciate it. Professional is good." He gestured toward the screen at the front. "Need help setting up." His tone dripped with mock politeness. "I'm good," I said. My calmness seemed to throw him off for a moment. He recovered quickly, glancing at the partners. "You know Liv always had wild ideas as a kid. Thought she'd reinvent the world. Guess she's still trying." I ignored the jab and began connecting my laptop to the projector. The hum of the machine filled the silence. Connor folded his arms, still grinning. "So, who exactly are you pitching to, some indie investors?" Before I could respond, the boardroom door opened. 5 people walked in, Marcus and his executive team from Atlas Interactive. The moment Connor saw the company badges, the color drained from his face. Marcus extended his hand toward me. "Ms. Reyes, thank you for arranging this space. Perfect setting." The partners looked at each other confused. Connor blinked. "Wait, you're with Atlas Interactive." Marcus smiled. "That's right. And today we're here to discuss acquiring Olivia's Echo Engine technology." The room fell into stunned silence. You could hear the soft click of the projector powering on. I glanced at my brother. The smirk was gone. His jaw tightened, his eyes darting between me and Marcus. I took a slow breath and said, "Let's begin." As I walked them through the architecture of the Echo Engine, the screen filled with visualizations, real-time neural mapping, adaptive emotional modeling, and behavioral response graphs. The data pulsed like a living organism. One of the Atlas execs murmured, "Incredible." "It's almost anticipatory." Connor cleared his throat, trying to salvage his dignity. "Dynamic scaling, right? Every game uses it." I turned to him, meeting his eyes. "Not like this. Would you like to test it?" He hesitated. The partners encouraged him, amused. He took the tablet from me, still pretending indifference. "Sure. Why not?" As he started playing, the projector displayed his live interaction map. The engine tracked his hesitation, risk tolerance, and even micro-delays in decision-making. Within seconds, the system generated personalized challenges centered around legal negotiation and risk exploitation. Connor frowned. "What the hell is this?" I tilted my head slightly. "It adapts to who you are." The room went silent again. The data visualization pulsed red, showing patterns of competitiveness and ethical compromise. One of the partners whispered, "It's profiling him." Marcus leaned back, impressed. "She's not building games. She's building adaptive psychology." Connor stopped playing, the color gone from his face. I smiled gently. "Don't worry, it only shows what's already there." No one laughed this time. By the time I finished, the Atlas team was already discussing acquisition terms. I closed my laptop, looking directly at my brother. "Thank you for letting me use your space, Connor. I wanted you to see what my hobby turned into." He opened his mouth, but no words came. The partners were too busy whispering about valuation figures to notice his silence. Justice didn't always need a gavel. Sometimes it just needed a projector and a little bit of code. The meeting stretched on for nearly 2 hours, but to me it felt like a heartbeat frozen in glass. The sunlight moved slowly across the table, glinting off water glasses and steel pins, as if the entire room were holding its breath. Marcus stood at the front, now pacing with quiet energy, explaining to the Lexington partners how Atlas planned to integrate the Echo engine into next-generation platforms. "This isn't about entertainment anymore," he said. "It's about human adaptability. Imagine educational software that learns how each student thinks, medical AI that reads patient anxiety in real time. The men who'd been chuckling at me an hour ago were silent now. Connor sat rigid, his hands clenched beneath the table. Every few minutes I caught his eyes flicking toward me, disbelief, maybe anger, maybe something worse. When the technical director from Atlas asked for live feedback data, I loaded the dashboard on the screen. Thousands of color-coded threads pulsed like veins, each representing a player somewhere in the world, each generating a unique learning curve. No two games are the same, I explained evenly. Echo Mind doesn't just react, it evolves with you. It studies your emotional rhythms, learns how you think, what frustrates you, what motivates you. It personalizes your experience with surgical precision. One of the Lexington partners let out a low whistle. That's unnerving. Marcus smiled. It's the future. Connor shifted uncomfortably. So, he said, forcing a smirk, you've built a program that manipulates people's feelings. Sounds familiar? The jab was meant to remind me of my old job, but I didn't flinch. It doesn't manipulate, I replied softly. It mirrors. It shows people who they really are. Marcus gestured to the data. It's adaptive empathy, gentlemen. The Atlas team began pulling out documents, thick, pristine folders stamped with the company logo. Marcus opened one and slid it across the table toward me. Ms. Reyes Atlas is prepared to offer $200 million for full acquisition of the Echo engine and a long-term partnership to lead our adaptive AI division. The sound of the number hit like a thunderclap. The room stilled. Connor's coffee cup slipped from his hand and shattered on the polished floor. His partners flinched. One muttered something under his breath. I didn't move. I simply folded my hands steady, calm, collected. 200 million, Marcus repeated as if to confirm reality. Connor tried to speak, his voice cracking. This can't be right. She works alone, out of her apartment. Marcus turned to him politely. Yes, and she built an engine that's about to redefine interactive technology. That's why we're here. The humiliation in Connor's face was almost painful to watch. The lawyer who had built his identity around control was now watching his younger sister dismantle it with a few lines of code and composure. He looked at me, and for a fleeting moment I saw something raw in his expression. Not arrogance, not anger. Fear. I leaned forward slightly. Remember, Connor, when you said I'd be broke by Christmas? I smiled. Looks like I'll be fine for a few more. The Atlas executives chuckled softly, not cruelly, but with the easy amusement of people witnessing poetic justice. Marcus cleared his throat. We'd like to move forward quickly. There's tremendous interest internally. He tapped the folder. This is a preliminary offer. After seeing the live emotional profiling, our valuation may rise. He paused, glancing at me. In fact, it already has. He pulled out a new page and slid it across the table. My eyes caught the number 250 million, plus a 5% revenue share for any future titles using Echo technology. My breath caught just for a moment. I steadied myself. That's generous, I said. It's deserved, Marcus replied. Connor's chair scraped against the floor as he stood abruptly. This is insane, he muttered. You make phone games. This isn't real. Marcus turned to him with professional patience. Mr. Reyes, I assure you it's very real. I closed the folder, gently sliding it into my briefcase. Thank you, Marcus. I'll review it with my counsel. He smiled knowingly. Of course. When the Atlas team began packing up, the Lexington partners broke their silence. At last, polite compliments, cautious curiosity, all laced with the desperate need to distance themselves from Connor's arrogance. As the executives shook hands and left the room, I stood too, turning to my brother. Thank you for the space, I said. I wanted you to see what you almost laughed me out of. He didn't respond. The silence between us was a canyon. Marcus lingered at the doorway, looking back once. You know, he said to me, we usually host meetings like this at our headquarters, but I think I understand why you chose this place. I nodded. Some lessons have to be taught on home ground. The door closed behind them, and for the first time in years, I watched Connor's confidence crumble. The boardroom that had always been his arena felt smaller now, colder. He stood there surrounded by the fragments of his own certainty, and I finally felt free. Justice hadn't shouted. It had spoken softly through data and design and left no room for argument. The next morning, the story broke. Atlas Interactive acquires Echo Engine in $250 million deal. The headline flashed across every major gaming outlet, tech blog, and business feed before sunrise. My phone buzzed non-stop journalists, investors, distant acquaintances who hadn't spoken to me in years, suddenly remembering my number. Even Neuralpath, the company that had fired me, issued a statement congratulating me on pioneering the next evolution of ethical AI. I laughed when I read that loud, sharp a sound that startled even me. Ethics had been what cost me my job. Now it was the word they used to chase relevance. By mid-morning, the local news van was parked outside my apartment building. I didn't open the door. I sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by the same sketches and notebooks I'd once almost thrown away. The air smelled like coffee and rain again. The difference was this time the rain sounded like applause. Then the messages from my family began. My mother called first, her voice bright and trembling. "Olivia, I saw you on the news. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. I always knew you were talented." I didn't answer right away. There was a pause on the line, the kind that grows teeth. "Mom," I said finally, "you told me to get serious, to stop embarrassing the family." She sighed. "Oh, Liv, I didn't mean it like that. You know how worried we were." "Worried?" I repeated. The word tasted bitter. "You were embarrassed. There's a difference." She started to say something else, but I hung up gently before she could. Connor's text came next. No greeting, no emoji, just, "We need to talk." I stared at it for a long time, the same way I'd once stared at my code, waiting for it to compile. Finally, I wrote back, "About what? You humiliated me." I almost laughed again, but it wasn't funny. "No, Connor," I typed slowly. "You did that yourself. I just let the truth play out in the open." He didn't respond. But later that evening, I received a second message, this one, longer, jagged, desperate. "You think this makes you better than everyone. You embarrassed the firm. You embarrassed me. You're nothing without that code. Remember that." I locked my phone and set it face down on the counter. For years, his words had cut into me like glass. But now, they just sounded small. I looked around the apartment, the same cramped space I'd coded in, cried in, dreamed in, and for the first time, I saw it differently. It wasn't a prison anymore. It was the forge. When Atlas's legal team arrived that afternoon to finalize the first round of contracts, I signed them quietly, deliberately. I kept my old whiteboard behind the couch, its edges frayed marker stains permanent. At the top, in faded blue ink, were the words I'd written the night everything began. "Let them underestimate you." I refused to erase it. The next day, Atlas sent a moving company to relocate my equipment to their Seattle office. They offered to send a car. I declined and walked there instead. The rain had stopped and the city felt alive again. Every streetlight reflected in the puddles like a mirror. At the reception desk, a young assistant smiled nervously. "Ms. Reyes, welcome. The team's waiting upstairs." As the elevator doors closed, I caught my reflection in the polished steel calm, steady, unflinching. The girl who once begged for approval was gone. The woman replacing her had learned that silence wasn't weakness. It was armor. When I stepped into the new office, applause broke out, genuine, spontaneous echoing off glass walls. Marcus approached, shaking my hand. "Welcome to the future, Olivia." I smiled faintly. "No," I said. "Welcome to the present. The future's still learning." And deep down, I knew that every line of code I'd ever written, every long night, every insult, every moment of doubt had been worth it. Because in building something that could understand human emotion, I'd finally reclaimed my own. The weeks that followed were a blur of contracts, interviews, and congratulations. Atlas moved fast, press tours, photo shoots, sleek marketing videos where my name appeared beside words like visionary and trailblazer. It should have felt euphoric. For the world, I had made it. For me, something still felt unfinished. Every time I stood under studio lights or spoke on camera about the power of human empathy in AI, I heard the echo of Connor's voice from that dinner table. "You'll be broke by Christmas." Success hadn't silenced that voice. It had only made it louder in the empty spaces of my mind. One evening, after a long day of meetings, I returned to my apartment soon to be vacated. Most of my belongings were packed, but the walls were still scarred with old tape marks from the sketches I'd once pinned there. I made tea, sat on the floor, and scrolled through the avalanche of online praise. Olivia Reyes is the woman redefining gaming, a true underdog story, from failure to fortune. They made it sound simple, like a straight line between ridicule and redemption. No one wrote about the nights I sat shaking from exhaustion or the family who mistook passion for delusion. The next morning, Marcus called. "We're flying to Tokyo next month. The executives want to build a dedicated eco division there." I hesitated. "Tokyo." He laughed. "You'll love it. They're even talking about recreating your original workspace for PR, the garage that changed gaming." I smiled politely, but when the call ended, I sat in silence for a long while. A garage replica in Tokyo. How ironic. They wanted to immortalize the struggle, but not the person who survived it. That night, my phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Tessa. "Hey, big sis, Mom wants to plan a family dinner to celebrate you. Can we do Sunday?" I stared at the screen. I hadn't been back to that house since the night I'd walked out. Part of me wanted to delete the message, pretend it didn't exist. Another part, smaller but louder, wanted to go, to see if they had changed or if I had simply outgrown their noise. Sunday arrived gray and cold, the kind of Seattle weather that seemed to press on your skin. When I entered my mother's house, everything was exactly the same. Same chandelier, same white tablecloth, same scent of lamb and rosemary. Connor was there too, sitting stiffly at the table, expression unreadable. Mom rushed to hug me, tears already forming. "Olivia, you look wonderful. We've all missed you so much." I smiled thinly. "It's been a while." Dinner was polite at first, even pleasant. Tessa asked about Tokyo. Mom beamed whenever I spoke. But then Connor cleared his throat. "So, Liv," he said, voice tight, "what's it like being everyone's favorite prodigy now?" I looked at him carefully. "It's quieter than you'd think." He gave a hollow laugh. "Must be nice. Some of us have to rebuild our reputation after your little stunt." Mom's smile faltered. "Connor." "No," he snapped. "She humiliated me, Mom. Do you have any idea what the partner said after that meeting?" "You think I can just show my face at the firm again?" I put my fork down. "Connor, you humiliated yourself. You mocked me for years. All I did was show up." He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You set me up. I invited you to witness the truth. What you did with it was your choice." The table went silent. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Tessa looked away. Finally, I said softly, "I didn't do any of this to hurt you. I did it to survive you." No one spoke after that. The air felt heavy, thick with everything that had never been said. When I stood to leave, Mom grabbed my hand. "Please don't stay away so long next time." I nodded gently. "Maybe someday, when silence means peace, not punishment." Outside, the rain had started again. I didn't take an umbrella. I wanted to feel it, the cold, the clarity, the truth that even victory can ache. A week after that dinner, I received an envelope at my new office, hand-delivered with my name written in my mother's familiar looping script. Inside was a letter. No return address, no apology. Just a few sentences written in her perfume-scented handwriting. "We're all proud of you. Connor's been quiet lately. He doesn't mean to hurt you. He's just lost. Family shouldn't stay broken over pride. Maybe you can help heal that." I set it down beside my keyboard and stared at it for a long time. Pride, I thought. The word was too small for what we'd survived. That evening, when the office emptied out, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Tokyo was still weeks away, but Atlas had already begun planning a full relocation lab space staff, a replica of my apartment down to the chipped desk. I should have been thrilled, yet something about it felt unfinished. Maybe Mom was right about one thing: families shouldn't stay broken. But forgiveness wasn't something you mailed in a letter. It had to be earned. So 2 nights later, I did something unexpected. I invited Connor to the Atlas headquarters. The email was short. "You once said I'd never have a real job. Come see what that looks like now." He showed up the next morning, cautious, wearing his best suit, but looking smaller than I remembered. The receptionist guided him through security and into my office. He looked around, jaw tight, taking in the glass walls, the digital art panels glowing with EchoMind's signature blue. "Nice place," he said finally. "Thanks," I replied. "It's real work, real money." He winced but didn't argue. I gestured toward the large monitor behind me. Want to see what we're building next? He hesitated, then nodded. I loaded the latest Echo prototype, a system that could simulate empathy through generative conversation evolving based on emotional cues. The interface pulsed softly like a heartbeat. It reads, tone, silence, hesitation, I explained. Not to manipulate, just to understand. Connor leaned closer, eyes narrowing. And it really feels, not exactly, but it mirrors human patterns. It learns your emotional logic. He stared at the screen the same way he used to study contracts, searching for a loophole to disprove me. Can it tell when someone's lying? I smiled faintly. Sometimes better than people can. He didn't answer. The hum of the computer filled the silence. After a while, he said quietly, I wasn't fair to you. I waited. I thought I was protecting you, he continued. But really, I was jealous. You weren't afraid to lose. I couldn't understand that. It wasn't an apology, not fully, but it was a beginning. I know, I said, and I don't hate you for it, but I can't forget it either. He nodded, looking down. Mom wants us all together again before you leave for Japan. I folded my arms, considering. If I go, I'm not sitting at that table pretending the past didn't happen. We talk about it, out loud. He looked uncomfortable. She won't like that. She doesn't have to, I said simply. Forgiveness isn't comfort. It's confrontation. He looked at me then, not the sister he'd dismissed, but the woman he'd underestimated. His mouth opened closed again, then finally, all right, you deserve that. When he left, the office felt lighter, like I'd exhaled something I'd been holding for years. I turned back to the window, the skyline reflected in the glass, my own face layered over it. The Echo prototype was still running lines of dialogue rippling across the screen. Forgiveness detected, emotional response, steady. I smiled faintly. Even the machine knew what I'd just done. That night, I went home to my empty apartment box's packed whiteboard leaning against the wall. Before bed, I uncapped a marker and wrote one more line beneath the old phrase, forgiveness must be earned. 2 sentences side by side, glowing faintly in the low light. Let them underestimate you. Forgiveness must be earned. The first had built my strength. The second would protect it. Tokyo was unlike anything I'd imagined. The new Atlas facility sat on the 12th floor of a glass tower overlooking Shibuya. Crossing the city, pulsing beneath it like a living network, chaotic, brilliant, endlessly alive. When I arrived for the first time, they guided me down a hallway lined with screens displaying fragments of EchoMind's evolution player reactions, emotion maps, adaptive responses, entire worlds reshaping themselves in real time. And then I saw it. Behind a glass panel was a replica of my original workspace, the Brooklyn apartment rebuilt from photographs. The scuffed desk, the flickering lamp, even the coffee mug with a faint lipstick stain. Above the desk hung my whiteboard, perfectly copied marker strokes preserved like relics. Only one thing wasn't a replica, the new line beneath the old one. Atlas had copied the phrase, let them underestimate you, but someone probably. Marcus had added the second sentence in bold blue. Forgiveness must be earned. I stood there for a long moment, watching engineers walk past without knowing the story behind those words. They saw inspiration. I saw survival. Over the next months, I led the new division expanding EchoMind into what we called living worlds, a persistent environment where every decision shaped the world itself. Players weren't just participants anymore. They were co-creators. The system remembered kindness, betrayal, hesitation. It learned not just how people played, but why. The day Living Worlds launched, the servers nearly crashed from demand. Journalists called it the first emotional MMO. A reviewer wrote, "It doesn't just entertain, it heals." I smiled when I read that because healing was exactly what the journey had forced me to do. 2 months later, I flew home for the first time. The family dinner felt different this time, smaller, quieter, the air less sharp. Connor met me at the door, no smirk, no sarcasm, just a nod. "You really did it," he said simply. Mom cooked too much food, like she always did. Tessa talked softly about wanting to start something of her own. The tension didn't vanish, but it loosened its grip. After dinner, Connor approached me on the porch while the rain fell steady outside. "I've been thinking about what you said," he admitted. "About forgiveness needing to be earned." He took a deep breath. "I'm not there yet, but I'm trying." I looked at him for a long time, then nodded. "That's enough." When I left that night, Mom hugged me tighter than she had in years. There were no grand speeches, no tearful apologies, just quiet acknowledgement. Sometimes that's all people can give, and sometimes it's enough. Back in Tokyo, Atlas presented me with a framed plaque, The Lab That Changed Everything. They'd mounted a photo of the rebuilt workspace next to it. I asked if I could replace the photo with something else, a snapshot I'd taken of the rain hitting my old apartment window the night EchoMind first worked. The grainy blur of light and glass reminded me that even storms could shimmer if you looked close enough. In interviews, people always asked the same question. What's your advice to creators who feel unseen? I used to give technical answers, work hard, stay curious, but now my answer had changed. I told them the truth. If people doubt you, I said that's fine. Let them. Doubt is their way of defining their limits, not yours. What matters is what you build in the silence when no one's clapping. That's where the revolution begins. The reporter nodded, typing quickly, but I wasn't finished. And when you succeed, I added, forgive if you can, but only if they've learned why they hurt you. Forgiveness without understanding is surrender. That line ended up quoted everywhere. It wasn't meant to go viral, but it did. People tattooed it, printed it on posters, shared it online with stories of their own. The nurse who built a clinic after being dismissed, the teacher who started a school when no one believed she could, the retired mechanic who taught coding to kids. Every story carried the same rhythm. They underestimated me. I proved them wrong. On the anniversary of EchoMind's first release, Atlas hosted a live stream celebration. I stood before millions watching worldwide, the original whiteboard displayed behind me. The lights were warm, the applause thunderous. When the crowd quieted, I said softly, to everyone watching who's ever been told you're too small, too late, or too unrealistic, remember this. Sometimes the world laughs because it doesn't understand your language yet. Keep speaking it anyway. I paused, looking at the faint reflection of my younger self in the glass panel, the tired woman coding alone, daring to believe her voice mattered. Let them underestimate you, I finished, but never underestimate yourself. The chat flooded with hearts and clapping emojis, but I barely saw them. I was looking past the lights, past the cameras, toward the invisible millions building quietly in their own small rooms. That night, when I walked back through the lab, the whiteboard glowed under the soft lights. The words, old and new, stood side by side, steady as constellations. Let them underestimate you. Forgiveness must be earned. And for the first time, I didn't feel underestimated. I just felt seen.